Welcome to Module 4 of the Hippocrates at Home program on supplementation. We're excited to bring you a very unique opportunity for you to understand once and for all what you need to know about supplementation. We interviewed Dr. Brian Clement for several hours, delving deeply into his book, Supplements Exposed, the truth they don't want you to know about vitamins, minerals, and their effects on your health.
Among many other things you're going to learn from Dr. Brian Clement, the myths that shroud the whole supplement industry, the dangers that you run by not knowing how to supplement your diet appropriately, and finally what specific nutrients do for your health and how to make sure you're getting enough of them from food sources and supplementation. We know it may seem like a lot of time to put into this subject, but it is so rife with misinformation and misunderstanding that we feel it's worth the time. You're going to discover how the core foods of the Hippocrates health lifestyle are the source for all of your nutrient needs, with a very few exceptions, and you'll have the confidence to make your own informed decisions about what is a good supplement. Let's go to Brian now.
Dr. Brian Clement, you recently published Supplements Exposed. Why did you write the book?
Because starting in 1976, the first red flag I had was when I received a call from my colleague, Dr. Arthur Robinson. Most of you out there do not know who Dr. Robinson is, but he was literally the man doing all the research behind Linus Pauling, then at the Linus Pauling Foundation in Palo Alto, California. And they had just concluded an international 5-year study on supplementation, and he discovered, even with high doses vitamin C, over a long period of time, that it caused cancer. And other vitamins, by the way, were causing disease. So in 1976, I got that call, and overnight, supplementation became suspect to me. From that point forward, I tried really hard and strived really much to find any honest research that was done globally on supplements, and as little and as few studies that are done on it, each and every one articulated the same exact thing that Art Robinson did to me in 1976. I thought that was the end of the show, that it was about time somebody pulled the plug on the most demonic part of the so-called natural health industry, because most people do not realize that the very pharmaceutical companies that they have gained a great distaste for literally make well over 80% of all the basic supplements that then smaller companies or themselves, through companies that they've bought, produce these supplements and put very, very, very interesting little tidbits on the bottles, like "Dear brother and sister, let's save the earth. This is natural." And so that's why I wrote the book, and I hope to God that this gets into the hands of millions and millions of people, so they save billions and billions and billions of dollars that they're wasting on supplements, but worse than that, making themselves sicker by taking chemical supplements. And by the way, if they don't get sick from taking the chemical supplement themselves, they will if they continue to do it.
Now, even with a healthy diet, though, and of course, you know, a healthy diet by your standards is quite different even than many raw foodists, but we do need supplementation. So on the other side, the answer is not just to, you know, throw out the whole idea of supplementation.
There has never been a time in human history where people need supplements or proper nutrition more than now in the beginning of the second decade of the 21st century. I mean, we have more stress, more pollution, more activity, more brain work, and all of this adds up to more nutrients. And so we have the less nutrients that anybody has ever had, and we need more. So the 8% or so that are good, 92% being bad on the market, are something that we strongly suggest for people to take. But again, if you're going to take money in this country alone, we spend $22 billion a year on supplements. Why not spend it on the proper whole food living supplementation?
I agree.
Great. Now, in the book, you mentioned that organic farm soils now contain only 2 to 4% organic matter.
Well, I think what we need to do, if you're going to talk about that, is talk about the 4 vitamin misconcepts. And what you're referring to is in misconcept number 1. Food contains all the vitamins you need. So let's start with that, and we can go through the whole 4 on the list. Now, what happened is that we had the very first Earth Summit back approximately 15 years ago, where all the major world leaders came together down in Brazil. And this was the first attempt that humans made to talk about weather changes, about what we're doing to this planet, how to live on it in a healthy way. And again, we're still talking 15 years later, not getting very far, as you just saw recently in Copenhagen. But what they did is they wisely brought together the top agricultural scientists alive then, and they did global reports on the depletion of nutrition from soil, nutrients from soil. Now, sit back and hold your hat on this one. They found that in North America, back about 15 years ago, now it's worse, that we had depleted in far less than 100 years from our topsoil, our farm soil, 85% of the nutrients. So even the so-called organic food that most of you are purchasing from large companies are grown in depleted soil. Most soil that they're growing organic foods on are 2 to 4% nutritious, where, by the way, you have to have 20 to 25% before it's worthwhile calling something a good food that grows in it. So this is the big reason why we don't have the nutrition we have today. They studied thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and found out that a very few people, less than 25% or less than a quarter of people, actually eat enough fruits and vegetables. Now that's just looking at enough fruit and vegetables. How many of that 25%, meaning 75% do not, to get nutrition, eat adequately grown organic foods? Well, I would render to believe, and we don't have this statistic, it's less than 0.5%. So if 25% are eating enough fruits and vegetables that are grown in depleted soil, it's only 0.5% that are probably getting all the nutrition they need from fruits and vegetables, because they are either growing the food themselves in organic soil that they cultivate, or buying it, or living in an area where there's lots of good organic soil.
So to put that in a framework, I guess a more long-term solution is that the soils have to be addressed, at a macro level. But at a micro level, we have to supplement. Absolutely,
you have to supplement. And even those of us who eat extremely well, like I have for 40 years, still I get up every morning, I take 35 whole food supplementation. Well, because there are some of us who expel and expend a lot more energy and love what we do, and so express that in a lot of action and work. And with that, we may need superior levels of nutrients. So we have extra physiological and mental capacity.
And that section on that you mentioned, the different myths. Number one, that that people don't think we need supplementation. You also talked about if we don't get the nutrients we need, our bodies can't function optimally. And different studies, for instance, the low levels of vitamins B5, B3, and calcium are linked to arthritis. But they've actually found, I guess, many diseases linked to deficiencies.
I absolutely, after all these years of doing this work, do not think there is a disease that a major part of why that disease occurs is from nutritional deficiency, if not the total disease is from nutritional deficiencies. Now, what's really interesting, before we discovered the very first supplement, a young research physician in London, England, back in 1905, called William Fletcher did that. And he discovered B1. And he was looking at that because a well-known disease, a very chronic disease at that point through culture and society, was beriberi. And he was trying to find a way to resolve beriberi. That can kill you, by the way. And he found on the side of whole grain brown rice what he isolated and called B1. Now, from that point forward, within 30 to 40 years, we discovered that this wasn't an isolated nutrient, that it was actually part of a family called the B complex family. So there is a small example. Many diseases are 100% like beriberi deficiencies. Pellagra, another deficiency. But again, if you go to the mainstream medical community and ask what to do, it is almost 100% likely that they're going to give you an antibiotic or an anti-inflammatory that has nothing to do with fulfilling nutrients, and as a matter of fact, reduce the little bit of nutrition you have in you by wiping it out of the body. So, yeah, this is a very serious thing. Cancer. Here in the United States alone, our Disease Control Center has stated that they think upward of 80% of all cancer is lifestyle created. Now, guess what? I think that 98% of all heart attacks and strokes are lifestyle created. Eating the wrong things that we consider food, that we fill ourselves up with, and not having the right things that have nutrition in it. I don't think there is a disease, diabetes. None of these diseases are not directly related with deficiencies and overeating something that doesn't have nutrition, that gives us fat, weight, etc.
Excellent. In that section, with the misconception number one, you start talking about the differences in the processes of creating synthetic vitamin supplements versus naturally occurring supplements. It'd be great for you to share, a little bit just about that.
Well, again, 92% of the supplements on the market globally, certainly here in the United States, are chemicals. They come from laboratories and chemical factories. Most of them are the pharmaceutical industry or wings or offshoots of the pharmaceutical industry that produce them. As an example, most are made of petrochemicals, oil products, and the best example, we can go right back to B vitamins again. They make B6 out of coal tar. Now, any of you listening to me now on the radio in your automobile, you're driving on the top of coal tar. That's what they make B6 out of. Now, versus how they would make B6 in a natural way, they would have to find a plant that had the B vitamins in it. They would then, with water, a very gentle process, exhume or extract out of that plant the B vitamins, which, by the way, when you take it from a whole natural source like that, B6 or B1 or B2 or B3 are not isolated and solo acts. They symbiotically work together in a symphony. So you would listen to the London Symphony playing a piece from Mozart versus, a kid who just picked up the guitar yesterday and is playing hard rock music. And so when you extract it out with water like that, without heating it, without processing it, without killing it, it then gets into the body with a symphonic approach, all of the violin section, all of the horn section, all of the percussion section, the piano, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the body relates to that and can digest it. Whereas when you place in the body a chemical isolated nutrient, like from coal tar or some other petrochemical process, the body's immune system looks at it and says, who are you? And because this isolated chemical cannot respond correctly, the immune system literally goes and attacks it. Now, this is how you get sick from taking these chemical supplements. And by the way, what I'm telling you today, in total, is not my opinion. It's scientifically factual. And I will debate anyone at any organization, any institution, any university in the world, and I will win the debate on supplementation. We have a flawed foundation when it comes to supplements. The same paradigm we have from pharmaceutical thinking is the same exact paradigm that we have in supplementation. We use supplements in an orthomolecular way as medicines. And somehow with our arrogance and lack of intelligence and consciousness in science, in most of the biological sciences, and the scientists who operate those sciences, we literally think we know as much as God and nature, and that we have an infinite ability to create in a man-made laboratory with chemical processes, like I've just mentioned to you, something that mimics nature 100%. Now, that's a bizarre thought to begin with. And if I were to ask a high school educated person, basically, if that made sense to them, they would say no. But somehow it makes sense to our doctors and PhDs because arrogance is what reigns, that they literally think they have figured out everything nature has to offer, which is bizarre in the mere fact that anyone's alive long enough and working in the field of nutrition, we discover new things on a weekly basis. So how can we be so callous that we discover the very first supplement, Fletcher, in London in 1905, out of a whole food, and by 1933 create the very first chemical process, and that's vitamin C, absorbic acid. So what was that? 28 years? It took us 28 years to do that. Now, why did we do that? Money. Listen closely. Money. If I have to go out every single year and collect with human hands whole plant foods and bring them in to a whole food processing plant that may take 2 or 3 days of laborious labor to water extract, to make sure it's not heated or chemicalized or bonded in any way, as we do the Hippocrates Life Give supplements, it costs a lot of money. And by the way, every single year those human hands cost more money to fund to go out and pick the plants. So by 1933, Merck of Germany, a pharmaceutical company, knew the future of supplementation, knew that this was going to be another wing of the pharmaceutical industry, big pharma, and said, okay, we don't want to do that. So let's go in with our arrogance to laboratories, get our young upshoot scientists to find what we can about, in the case of vitamin C, vitamin C. Now, when they made vitamin C absorbic acid, what they did is leave behind 7/8 of vitamin C, because it's only 1/8 absorbic acid of whole food vitamin C. And when you put that absorbic acid in your body, and certainly if you've been to these holistic type doctors who don't know their head from a hole in the ground, who gave you thousands and thousands of milligrams of this IV, your immune system freaks out and says, oh my God, we've got to get rid of this highly acid, highly chemical substance. So now what you think is helping you, and especially it's so heart-wrenching when I hear them say this helps you with cancer, your body is going to be weakened and your cancer will have a greater opportunity to grow, since now the immune system is over there getting rid of absorbic acid rather than whole food vitamin C. If in fact you put whole food varieties of vitamin C, or ate a rosehip, or acerella cherry, you would be getting all of the whole food vitamin C you need, taking a supplement like Hippocrates make or other ethical companies make, and there's 8% of us in this industry that do make ethical supplements, then your body's going to say, wow, that's great. It's going to put muscles on my immune system cells. It's going to make my red blood cells stronger so that when I have muscles and strength in my cells, when the free radicals come to kill me, and that's how all aging and premature aging and disease, every single disease occurs, is free radical damage, my cell's going to have the muscle to punch it and say, hey, I'm not going to die. And that's called what? That's called antioxidant effect that Dr. Harmon at the University of Nebraska, which, by the way, happens to be one of the great schools of scientific medicine and biology and nutrition, in 1954 discovered. And that's the antioxidant free radical that, by the way, he was right in 1954. And, by the way, what you need to do is take whole food vitamin C to get the benefit, not an isolated chemical. 98% of all vitamin C on the market is a chemical called absorbic acid.
Wow.
Well, at least to a question I had about vitamin C, because it is one of the most common supplements that people take, even people that normally don't take others. So you're saying that not only are they obviously wasting money because they're not getting the good effects, but in many cases it's actually doing them harm.
As my friend Dr. Arthur Robinson alerted me to in 1976, this is a man that did all of Linus Pauling's research. This is not a lightweight. This is a heavyweight nutritional scientist. He stated to me in 1976, when we put healthy people on high doses of vitamin C long term, they manifested cancer. Now, how clear can we be on this? And today, the so-called holistic alternative doctors, with bogus research that is being generated out of the chemical industry, which happens to be the pharmaceutical industry, are telling you if you want to get rid of cancer, take large doses of chemical vitamin C.
And then in the book, you also had an interesting story about the porta potty business. I guess those were all synthetic vitamins that were just going right through people's bodies, not even being processed.
Absolutely. There's many vegans listening to us today that think they're taking, great supplements because they want to supplement their diet. And they should, but with the right supplements. And how many vegans out there know that bonding agents and the shellac that is quite often used on keeping the supplement together, and these are the ones, in fact, they find at the bottom of the porta potties, are made out of the wings of beetles. And there are farms, you vegans listen, there are farms in India that specifically grow these beetles, take their wings, and use them as shellac.
Wow.
So, now you ask me why I wrote this book. Supplements exposed should be in everyone's hand in the world today, and we need to change this whole industry to be helpful rather than harmful.
Agreed. Now, however, people do have positive results from taking synthetic vitamins, do they not? How do you explain that?
They never have positive results. They have short-term symptoms change, just like you do from medicines. I don't think there's any listener out there that would squabble with me about medicines long-term are bad. But medicines short-term can take symptoms away, can't they not? And what I said to you about 17 minutes ago is that supplements are the same exact paradigm as pharmaceutical drugs, that they look at them as devices to help you eliminate and prevent disease. And if you take an ascorbic acid, by the way, it's a stimulant in the body. So if you have a common cold, other than the placebo effect, which is very powerful, by the way, where you think this is going to help me, it's going to get rid of common cold, if you stimulate a person laying on a couch with their head spinning in circles, they're going to feel like they're getting a benefit. Whereas a B vitamin, a chemical supplement made out of what? Coal tar, is a sedative effect. It is almost a barbiturate effect if you took enough of that. A person who's stressed and takes B vitamins are going to feel the synthetic effect called de-stressing. Now, does it mean it's helping them? Is there any benefit? Of course not, because what I've said to you before is scientific fact, that 100% of the time when you take a chemical, be it pollution in the air or pollution from the supplement you just bought, the immune system attacks it. And if your immune system is over there attacking and eliminating a chemical supplement, it is not protecting you from disease. It is not acting as an antioxidant, but in fact, creating oxidation, creating free radical damage, because it's killing cells. That's what's happening.
Now, you also described in the book the difference between a synthetic vitamin molecule, looked at under a microscope, that it may look like a natural one, but it's not, and you used the acronym HOPE. Would you explain that?
Well, what's really interesting, this book has only been out a short time, but my best measurement on how effective pictures are is with the youngest children. So as of 2 days ago, I've shown it now to 15 children, all below 9 years old. The majority of them were 5, 6, 7. I had a 4-year-old stuck in there too. On page 41 in Supplements Exposed, on misconcept number 1, I've shown 15 children, all below 9, only 1 9, most 5 and 6, this picture, and I said, which one would you like to eat? And guess what? 15 children pointed to the whole food supplement. And 15 cases, I said to them, why don't you like that other one? And out of them, listen to me closely, 8 of them said, it looks ooky or dead. The word was ooky or dead. So even if you're not good readers, buy my book, look at page 41, and tell me if you have enough common sense after that, with a microscope, looking at a supplement, to know which one you should be eating and not. The living one looks like sun, glowing and energy coming out of it. The dead one looks like the sun was killed. And so it's pretty simple. Also, later in the book, we did another, not myself, but a laboratory out in California did it for us. They actually show the energetic effects of supplement in the body. That's on page 133. And in this specific sample, we looked at a chemical variety, ascorbic acid of vitamin C, and amyla C. Amyla is a berry from the east that is very, very, very high, much more than rosehip in vitamin C. And this, of course, is a living whole food variety. Well, if you look at the chemical supplement, it looks like a digital camera that went wrong. And if you look at the amyla C, it looks like firecrackers going off on the 4th of July or New Year's Eve. Now, I mean, if you only look at the 2 pages I talked about, 41 and 133, even if you don't read very well, you're going to understand what I'm talking about here.
But that acronym was really helpful, too, if you could talk about that, the HOPE.
Yeah, I mean, HOPE, you have to understand that what we've learned here at Hippocrates over the 54 years that we've been in existence is that there are hormones and oxygen and phytochemicals and enzymes that are in this raw living food. And that's why we've had thousands, tens of thousands of people eliminate stage 4 cancers, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, right down the list of things. And also, all of us who live this way and also exercise and keep a positive attitude, it's not all food, we don't age the way the rest of the population does. And these are facts, I'm telling you. These are not my opinion. The bottom line is with this, is if you're getting the whole food, this HOPE, the hormones in the whole food, is part of a whole food supplement. And the hormones are the messengers, the chemistries that allow one cell to communicate with another cell. And we're not quite sure the mechanism or pathway of this, but we're positive this is true. That when you're taking, for instance, a whole food variety of vitamin E compared to the turpentine variety, that's over 80% on the market. I'll repeat that so you catch it. Compared to the turpentine that we call vitamin E, that's what they make most of that out of, 80% of it on the market, we would actually see that that whole food form of vitamin E would come into the body, and those hormones that are also contained within that whole foods variety and whole foods themselves would allow that vitamin E to go down the pathway of communication and enter into the human cell. Now we have the next letter of HOPE, oxygen. We knew in 1917, listen closely people, you can read this in my book Life Force. In 1917 we awarded the Nobel Prize to a German scientist who showed us you can't digest nutrients without oxygen being present. Now, what did I just say to you? And what happens when you cook a food or process a whole food supplement? You don't have any oxygen available. 1917, we give the guy a Nobel Prize and say, hey, you're right. You're the smartest doctor in the world on nutrients, and you're right. Then we sent him out to pasture and forgot about it because it's a whole lot cheaper to make chemical supplements. And there's a heck of a lot more profit, up to thousands of % more profit in a chemical supplement. So now what happens when you take a whole food, you get the oxygen or a whole food supplement, and you then fulfill what we knew in 1917. You can absorb the nutrients in there. Phytochemicals. What could be more profound than this? It's only 1948 we discovered the very first phytochemical. 1992 we kicked it off and started real research on it. And I'm now finishing a book that's up to 700, 800 pages that I'm probably going to have to break into 3 volumes on all the current research on just the subjects I'm picking. Because if I wrote this book on every damn subject on whole foods and plant-based foods that heal disease, this book would probably be 18,000 pages long. So the ones I'm selecting, and I have to be very selective, and I'm reading like a lunatic to do this, but by the way, this is going to be 800 pages, probably in 3 volumes, on how we know for sure in the scientific world how plant-based nutrients called phytochemicals prevent and eliminate disease. So this is also what you get in a whole food supplement. Then you get enzymes in there. And any of the raw foodie groupies out there listening know about enzymes because most of the raw food enthusiasts who are not scientists at least talk about the enzymes. And enzymes are one of 4 hormones, oxygen, phytochemicals, and enzymes. One of four of this four-leg table. That, in fact, those enzymes are what help the electromagnetic frequency become part of the nutrient. So it becomes a living nutrient, a whole ionic nutrient. Now, what the word ionic means is electrically charged nutrient. And so when you have a whole food supplement, the electrically charged nutrient deeply goes into the pathway of the cell and engages an electrical increase in frequency, also in addition to the free radical killers called antioxidants that you get from whole food vitamins, whole food nutrients, protect the cell electromagnetically from the free radical, which is electric killers of healthy cell.
So besides the picture, like you said, which says so much by itself, the dead cells, the synthetic ones, don't have any of this. They don't have the hormones.
They rob your body of they rob the body of nutrients. They give you disease. One section of the upcoming book, which hopefully will be out later this year, literally addresses it with the research on things like acrylamides, where you can take organic grains and cook them. They become cancer-causing. Once you cook these things, potatoes, French fries, cancer-causing. This is science. This is hardcore science that, by the way, you hear little tweeting birds early in the morning speak about, because the onslaught of research is governed and controlled by the companies that are trying to sell you things. They don't want you to know the truth, like Supplement Exposed explains to people.
Okay. Let's go on to misconception number 3, which talks about the fact that people think vitamin science results are reliable. You state very clearly that they're not.
Well, my God.
Talk a little bit more about that.
Here's how science works. I mean, it's if anyone doesn't understand this one, you really are naive and a little dumb. Let's just put it that way. Here's how science works. Somebody shows up with a major check and says to Scientist X, I'm going to give you the 5-year protocol that's necessary to prove this, but what I want you to show is that vitamin K is a great, circulatory activity nutrient. And I want you to come out with a study from Oxford University or Yale University or Cornell, whoever they're paying off there. And then, of course, they endow that university or organization with a little bit extra money, and when they come around once a year. And Scientist X does that. Now, you say, is it that raw prostitution going on? And the answer is yes. But under the cloak of science, they justify this. Who funds science? Corporations that have big money. What do you think? Some angel comes out of heaven occasionally with a checkbook and says, hey, here, scientist, here, I'm going to give you all the money you need. Knock yourself and do good for nature, do good for people, save humanity. Come on, grow up, get over it. Basically, they come with a checkbook from a pharmaceutical company or from a supplement industry or God knows what they're trying to prove, and basically tell you it's good. What do you think all the pharmaceutical testing is? It's, bogus research. What do you think they pay off the Food and Drug and Canadian Drug and the British drug agencies for? I mean, here in the United States, 56% of the funding for the Food and Drug Administration that's supposed to be protecting the public comes from the very pharmaceutical companies they're supposed to be scrutinizing. And the pharmaceutical companies make over 80% of all chemical supplements on the market, which is 92% of the supplements out there today. So come on. This is why you can't trust a word. Now, maybe occasionally by mistake somebody dies and leaves a few dollars to somebody with integrity, or somebody like young Arthur Robinson back in those days who had the courage to call me and alert me to what's going on, or the occasional slip-up like you had at Brigham's Women's Hospital in Boston, where the cat got out of the hat when in the middle of a lung cancer study with beta-carotene. Again, a chemical variety of beta-carotene. Not what they would get from broccoli sprouts or broccoli, but a chemical variety. They were using this on lung cancer patients with the absolute belief, which the old Flawed Foundation, everyone in biology and nutrition would probably believe this, would help to prevent and eliminate cancer. And in the middle of that Brigham's Women's Hospital study, they had to stop the people who were taking the beta-carotene because they had double the amount of tumor growth in their lungs. Now, you don't hear that very often. That one slipped out of the the hat without anyone knowing it. Or the Finnish study, when they were going to tell everyone in Finland, take antioxidants, take those chemical supplements, but that are called natural. Now, that's where it plays with people, because to call a supplement natural in all the countries around the world listening to me today, it only has to have 10% of natural goods in it. The other 90%, by law, protected in the nation you're living in, can be a chemical. And so, you see the word natural, and Finland went ahead and looked at, I think it was 268,000 people, as I recall. And the group that were taking the supplements versus the group that were not taking the supplements had 67% higher incidence of different diseases. Now, these are the studies that do pop up if you read as much as I do. But if you happen to be the average person who's not a nutritional guy or a scientist, what do you ever hear? You hear from the guy, Scientist X, who was just given $15 million, and now his 5-year quote research is done, and he manipulated because science is a study of. It's not an absolute, so it's all justified, and everyone, of course, believes they have their own ethics and their own honor, and they don't, unfortunately. So he manipulates numbers and creates the result the guy told him to create 5 years before.
You have a phrase that I see recurring a lot through the book, better living through chemistry.
Yeah.
And I understand that, but you can comment on, as you know, the view that so many people have today that our lives can be better not only through chemical supplements but even pharmaceutical drugs, you know, by somehow manipulating our bodies rather than giving them the nutrients they need and let them.
Yeah. When we radically moved in the direction of modern pharmaceutical medicine about 100 years ago, they realized this was a hard sell, because before that, the only medicine that was available everywhere on the planet Earth was natural medicine, where homeopathic doctors or naturopathic doctors, even the original medical doctors, all they used is herbs and love and food. That's all they had. But the emerging big pharma basically had to get advertising out there and propaganda, and it started, of course, in the medical schools. And this is why about half the education for a doctor, an allopathic doctor today, is paid for by the pharmaceutical industry. And I don't care if you're in China getting a medical education or in New York or Los Angeles or London or Paris. Half the education for medical doctors are paid for by the farms. So obviously, the farms write the books and put in the books what they need. And even though doctors are good people, I really genuinely believe, who meant well when they were 19 and decided to go to 12 years of school, I think that the overwhelming majority said, I want to help people, and that's why they did it. They're being molded to be agents for the pharmaceutical companies, and I would have to say, unless they're specialists, they are really glorified pharmacists. And the remedy, as you've learned out there listening today, for any disorder is a prescription. Unlike when I was a boy, which isn't that long ago, by the way, where doctors used to come to the house and love you and kiss you and tell you to eat right and not to eat. Oh, it's good you don't eat today because you may be sick. You have this. You know, that's long gone, people. Now doctors don't even look at you. They're rushing from one person to another, 50, 80 people a day they see. The nurses are exhausted. It's a big racket. And then on top of them, they have the insurance companies telling them they have to do paperwork. So doctors aren't generally doctors anymore, unless you happen to be wealthy and can get boutique doctors who spend an hour with you. But that's 1% of the population can do that. The rest of you are in the schlock group, that they basically line you up like cattle and run you through. So this is where it all started. It started with this whole sense of pharmaceutical ideology. Let's treat a disease, let's bang it out quick, let's get people in and out. And because of that ideology and philosophy, and the doctors doing this type of thing, and molding, the pharmaceutical molding what we call the supplement industry, it is done in the same callous way. They created health stores in the 1940s and 1950s, And even a health store today, if it's a large health store with a lot of organic good things in it, where they make their money, and there's 2 or 3 or 4 aisles of supplements, because those little bottles are major profit. The bigger companies, the bigger retail stores can actually make 50, 60, 70%, and even more if they get deals from the supplement companies on those supplements. Versus heads of lettuce, these are called loss leaders, that many of the smaller health stores and even the larger ones lose money on having organic produce in the store. That's just a come on. That brings you into the store. When you come on, they want you to go down that aisle that basically has the supplements in it, because that's where the money's being made. So as you see, this is all very well planned. So better life through chemistry was the mantra that came out of Madison Avenue for the pharmaceutical industry. And why, I can tell you right now, why I became interested in science back in the 1950s and 60s is because of that. We were literally being told in the medical fields that by the year 2000, all diseases would be eradicated. I bought into that when I was a youngster. We were literally told that robots would run everything by the year 2000, that we wouldn't have pollution anymore. I mean, but you look at today, 50 years later, and I can assure you that everything has completely done the opposite of what we've been told. And it is chemicals in the environment that are overwhelmingly the #1 cause of cancer. And I believe mental illness, and I believe autism. And these chemicals are coming from the factories that are producing goods to make the economic benefit for those factories. And, I mean, please, people, wake up. And if you think I'm extreme, being an intelligent guy that knows the facts, you are extreme. I mean, that's all I can say. People are extremely dumb and thick today not to see these things. They're as clear as a bright summer day with the sun shining on them. And if you don't know that you're a trained consumer, and they've done the same with supplements as they did with every other thing, the hamburgers that you were told were good to eat, and the Pepsi-Cola, and God knows what else, the ice cream, you're just the same old cow going down the trail doing exactly what they want you to do with a bell on you so they know where to find you the next time they have a product to sell you. And we've got to awaken. We've got to awaken our spirit, our consciousness, our mentality, and most important, our hearts. And if we do that, we cannot be conned. And yes, we need nutrients because we need them more than any human ever has in the history of humanity. But my God, if you're spending the time and money and effort, take whole food forms of them. You know, I'm not trying to sell you this book, but if you don't read this book, you're going to have a dwarf mentality when it comes to supplements. After you read this book, which is a very easy book to read, you will be a quasi-authority on it. And how many other hundreds of people or thousands of people over your lifetime can you steer right? If they're going to be in those stores buying those supplements, tell them to buy the right ones. And we do need them, and boy, do they help. And we've done clinical research on humans here for years, and the right ones save lives. Every single day we help to save people's lives here by using whole food supplements. But my God, the chemical variety, if I were still in the old days buying into that better life through chemistry idea, I'd be killing and hurting people here thinking I was helping them.
Dr. Clement, a fascinating subject that is an extension of that, and you introduce it in the book on page 69, is about fortification. I was just thinking about the image you brought up of the supermarkets, you know, how they get you in with the produce and then right after is the supplements. And then if you keep going, and nowadays whenever I make an incursion into the middle of the supermarket, it's for curiosity to read the labels and what's in these things. Mm-hmm. And I'm blown away by all the fortification, and it's when I read your book and did some other studying. That is just so crazy. First of all, when they process the food, they take the nutrients out, and then they go back and add other stuff that's chemical, right?
You bet it. I mean, it's really amazing. There were some people with honor and ethics back then. There was a guy back in the National Academy of Science. He got a little concerned. I think his name was Browenstein. And he basically said, wait a minute, this is insane. Let's describe what fortification of food is. And Congress here in this country, and I'm sure parliaments around the world, said, wait a minute, this is insane. We're taking whole foods that people have sustained on for the history of humanity, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. We're denaturing those foods. we're now malnourishing the public on a whole, and now we're saying we better buy supplements or we better buy nutrients to put back into it. This is insane. It's dumb, is what it is. And Bronstein described, as I recall, what fortification of food is. Puffed and flaked whole cereals must be fortified at later stages by a spray, dust, or infusion process. Here, libing vitamins such as thiamine are usually sprayed onto toasted cereals as they leave the oven. Now, I just mentioned something 9.5 minutes ago about toasted cereals, even if they're from organic grains. They're a cancer causer to begin with. How about telling the public, why don't you take a whole organic grain and sprout it and produce 10 times more food and at least 8 times more nutrition? Because once you sprout a food that costs pennies, by the way, unlike a box of fortified, chemicalized, carcinogenic organic cereal, the same amount of nutrition that you get in a 2 fingers worth of sprouts is more than you get through that cancer-causing organic cereal that you just purchased, or cancer-causing rice milk, which is what? A heated grain, or cancer-causing soy milk. Now, am I the only one saying this? Well, there's been 8 or 9 landmark studies globally, different nations around the world. First was Sweden, my wife's country, with the acrylamide ideas. And then this goes back to the 1930s, so Congress had a little bit of ethics and said, this is nuts. And they tried to stop the onslaught of Big Farm. You have Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical. The other evil ones are Big Farm, which, by the way, are progressively wiping out every 30 minutes in this nation alone. Every 30 minutes, a small farmer. And who are these people led by? Their hero? Monsanto. And this is the other evil part of the industrial complex that we have to look at today. The 3 tiers of the industrial complex, as our former President Eisenhower, who should know best, he was a general, and probably the best general in the Second World War, and probably, by the way, won the Second World War for those countries that were in it, and led by America. He said when he was leaving, the last speech, the military-industrial complex, and now we will add the other 2 evils, Big Pharma, pharmaceutical industry, who, by the way, in the United States of America sell twice as much pharmaceutical drugs to the public than any other nation in the world. So what that means, Americans, listen closely, is you consume double the amount of pharmaceutical drugs of any other nation in the world. Germany's number 2. Why? Germany has the 2nd largest pharmaceutical industry. France and Switzerland, number 3. And by the way, they have governments in their pockets, because when the public cries out and says we're paying too much for the pharmaceuticals, and say I want to go and get in a bus and go to other countries and buy my pharmaceuticals, they say, oh no, they're inferior pharmaceuticals. They're not as good as American pharmaceuticals, which is completely bogus. It's a lie at the highest degree, because the same pharmaceutical companies who have slave labor worldwide in third world countries producing their slave labor pharmaceutical drugs sell the same thing to Canada or to Europe that they do the United States or Mexico. So get in your buses if you're still stuck on farms and buy them, because they're the same drug. As a matter of fact, they may be a little bit better, because we have a higher amount of contamination in our American pharmaceutical drugs than do some others per capita. And then the last big evil one, the 3-tier approach as we talk about here, is Big Farm. And Big Farm started in the 1920s, 1930s, denaturing our food, and got in bed with Big Pharma and said, hey, we can figure out how to make some more money for you. Go back to the government and said, we have a resolution for denaturing the food. We'll sell you for billions of dollars a year. Billions of dollars. And you make a law, basically, so companies are required to put nutrients back in foods we denature, and that's what happened. So it's another ploy to make money, and the average schmo who's not so conscious and doesn't know much about nutrition and has a clicker where they have 9 million channels on their TV and sit and drink, beer at night or soda or potato chips or God knows what fast food they drove and got on their way home that night, they don't get it. they don't get that what's happening to them is they're being screwed with a big S.
Technical term.
Yes, very technical.
If I could read real quick a little part of your book talking about the pharmaceutical companies. It says most vitamin companies compete for customers with identical synthetic vitamin products made from compounds produced by the same few drug manufacturers. So they differentiate themselves on potency, but you go on to say the higher the potency of the synthetic vitamin, the more likely it is to exhibit drug-like toxic effects, the stress of which can actually lead to disease.
As you also may have read in the book, over the decades I've done this work, several times a year we have people who have been with the so-called alternative natural doctors who most often IV or inject into the bloodstream chemical supplements, and when they're coming off them here, they're no different than a drug addict coming off heroin or something. They sometimes bend over, get in a corner, perspire, have hallucinations, and we see this, again, a few times every year. This isn't a rare thing that I only have seen once in my life. I must have seen several hundred people go through these symptoms. And bottom line, quite simply, is that it's advertising and promotion. I mean, just like years ago, I read an expose in the New York Times about how blue jeans, when they come into the country, pretty much all come from the same company, and then companies put their name on the side. So you want to charge $150 for the same blue jeans that a guy selling for $22. You can do it by putting some fancy name of a designer on the side of the blue jean. Well, they do the same exact thing with supplements, and they con you and tell you how wonderful it is and it's good. And we've done research and time released. There's no such thing as a time release supplement. What do? Put more and less shellac from the wings of a beetle on it? What are they going to do to time release it? Potency. Again, the higher the potency, as you've just mentioned, the more potentiality for disease. More potentiality you'll be here someday, crouched in a corner, perspiring and shaking and seeing things. And so what we tell you here is so valid that it's unshakable truth.
Yep. So in addition to reading this book, of course, what are people to do? What 2 or 3 simple things can people do when they're shopping for supplements, when they're considering supplementation?
Well, number one, if somebody has the economic ability and a nutritionist or a doctor or a biochemist who has a brain, now that's hard to find, that live in your general locale, try to get a legitimate nutritional test like a SpectraCell test. That's the only one I've ever used in 4 decades because it's the only legitimate nutritional test available. That's one where they take the white blood cell out of the body, send it to a lab, cut it open and see what nutrition has been digested by the body. I don't care what you take, I care what's been digested and utilized by the body. And then once they do that, you'll know what you're missing. So if you cannot afford that, that's several $100s generally, then you have to guess a little bit or try to get advice from somebody who may have a little bit of experience with proper whole food nutrition, living food, vegan nutrition, and they may be helpful at some particular level to you. Now, with that said, I think it's also important for you to then, your next step, go out to your local proper whole food store. You're not going to find it at a chemical supplement store, but at a whole food store. And you go to the minimum wage employee who probably doesn't know a whole lot more than you, and you say to that person in a very polite and loving way that you want to see which whole food supplements that they have. Now, you're going to find a few of them don't even know what you're talking about, and we'll show you something called natural on the side, which I gave you the stats on that about 21 minutes ago. But what you really need to understand is you need to look at them in the eye and say, no, the whole food varieties. And worldwide, there are always a small amount of whole food varieties. They're the ones, if you're going to spend time and money and effort, you need to take. And yes, the average person needs to take whole food nutrients. Now remember, one that everyone should take is B12. And I don't care if you eat meat or dairy food, you all need B12 because we're not uptaking it and utilizing it. It doesn't analog into the body. And again, 97% of all B12 in the market is a chemical that does not digest. My latest study, my study I did in November of 2008 showed 38 people taking injections at least once, 2 times a month, but the majority, I think it was 63% of them, were taking it literally once a week. Out of them, 2 of them had been digesting or utilizing B12 from some food they're eating. But the rest of them, all of them were lacking B12, although they were taking at least twice a month, most 4 times a month, B12 injections. So there's an example. You need to find a whole food variety of B12. We create one, the Life Give product, but there are other ones on the market. Vitamin Code is one in the United States, Canada, and some of Europe you can get. That's a whole food variety of it. Number 3 thing I think that you need to do is most important, eat properly. Eat an organic, whole food, in great part, if not in total, raw food diet. And much of the nutritional terror that we just spoke about and worry that we spoke about would be minimized at best. And again, even those of us who have eaten this way forever and eat the purest and the best food on the planet Earth and consistently do it, at times because of the amount of effort and work and all the things that we deal with today versus people 4 and 5 generations ago, we need more nutrition. So on top of eating properly, which fulfills almost all the needs you have, you may need some whole food supplementation, and it's likely you need whole food supplementation, even more than the B12 I mentioned to you.